What did your child write in their school assignment that made the teacher call you immediately? When my daughter Grace's teacher called me in the middle of my workday, I assumed she'd forgotten her lunch again. Instead, Mrs. Peterson's voice was shaking as she asked me to come to the school right away. Apparently, their class assignment was to write about their weekend, and Grace's story had the teacher seriously concerned. Grace wrote about how her stepmom, Andrea, made her clean the entire house while I was away on business trips. She described scrubbing toilets at midnight, being forced to redo the floors multiple times if they weren't perfect, and getting locked in the basement when she complained. My heart stopped. Andrea had always seemed so loving toward Grace, especially when I was around. She'd even suggested adopting Grace officially once we got married. But Grace's story went on. She wrote about how Andrea would throw away the lunches I packed, telling Grace she needed to watch her weight. She described having to eat plain lettuce while watching her stepbrother Noah feast on pizza and ice cream. I called Andrea immediately. She laughed it off, saying Grace was just being dramatic because she'd asked her to help with some light chores. But something felt wrong. When I hung up, Mrs. Peterson showed me more of Grace's assignments from the past few months. They were filled with little hints I'd missed. Drawings of herself crying alone in her room, stories about being hungry, mentions of how much she missed me when I traveled. I left work early that day and drove straight home. The house was spotless, which was weird since Andrea always complained about how hard it was to keep up with housework. I went down to the basement, a place I rarely visited, and found cleaning supplies sized for a child's hands hidden behind some boxes. There were also granola bar wrappers stuffed in a corner, like someone had been sneaking food. When I confronted Andrea, she exploded. She screamed about how Grace was a spoiled brat who needed to learn responsibility, how Noah was naturally neat while Grace was a pig. She admitted everything, saying Grace deserved it for being your precious little princess. I recorded everything on my phone. Then I went upstairs and packed Grace's things while Andrea followed me, still ranting about how I was ruining our family. I called Noah's dad, Andrea's ex, and learned this wasn't the first time. She'd lost partial custody of Noah years ago for similar behavior, but had hidden this during our whirlwind romance. That night, Grace slept at my sister Autumn's house while I filed for divorce. When we returned home the next day, Andrea had cleared out her stuff, but she'd also destroyed every photo, toy, and piece of clothing Grace had left behind. She'd even poured bleach on Grace's favorite stuffed rabbit, the last gift from her mom before she passed. I thought that was the end of it, until Grace's next writing assignment. The topic was, what makes you happy? She wrote about how she finally got to eat breakfast every morning, how she didn't have to be afraid of making messes anymore, and how she loved having sleepovers at Aunt Autumn's house while I was traveling instead of staying with the mean lady.